How do you know about what's going on in New York City? From arts to culture to food to finding things on the cheap. There's so much going on in the Big Apple, and it can be extremely overwhelming. In this episode, you'll hear about what's going on in New York City, how to tailor it to suit your interests, and set up a system that will allow you to be informed continuously and know where to show up when. You're listening to How to Move to New York City, an instruction manual for the biggest move of your life. I interviewed New Yorkers, new and seasoned, from across every borough on the topics that matter most when integrating into a new place. You can't really be spontaneous in New York City, otherwise you're going to show up somewhere and there'll be no tickets, no space, or whatever it is you're trying to see no longer is really available to you. You need to be intentional and plan ahead, and what that means is knowing what is coming down the pipeline. If you subscribe to every single newsletter and social media account, it's equivalent to subscribing to nothing, because you're going to be inundated by stuff and it's going to be extremely overwhelming, and you're going to see a lot of things that are not actually things you want to attend to. So it's really about finding out what sounds exciting to you and where can you find out about those things. So the first section of this episode is talking about geographically based information. And then the second part is talking more about topical interest-based information. So first, one good starting point, if you're not really sure what your interests are, is to look at common newsletters that are more general arts and culture and beyond kind of events that are the entire city wide, to a specific borough, and then down to your neighborhood. So by and large, there are a ton of outlets that cover what's going on across the entire city. Now, the give and take of this is that you're not going to get everything. You're going to get a higher level view. They're going to only choose to highlight so many things. But it can be a great way to get exposed to things that you might not casually walk by all the time. So let me run through a list, and if any of these sound interesting, Google them and subscribe. The New Yorker's Goings On. There's also an app that you can use. It's, quote, what to watch, listen to, and do in New York City, online and beyond. Gothamist. You can see the arts and culture section, more of a newspaper, but brings awareness to what's out there. This is also generally the case for New York Times as well. The Skint was my personal go-to newsletter when I moved to New York City. It's for free and cheap things to do in New York, so little barriers to entry and oftentimes off the beaten path. Something that I heard from people I spoke with, they talked about the Joy List, and this is what I gathered from the website. The Joy List features events that you can attend alone and leave with a new friend. So perfect. Ideal. I wish I had known about that when I had moved to New York. Nonsense NYC is, quote, a discriminating resource for independent art, weird events, strange happenings, unique parties, and senseless culture in New York City, end quote. I really like that newsletter too. Super funky. I even plugged this podcast on there once, asking for people to interview, which was super helpful. There's also NYC Tourism. Definitely aimed at tourists, but locals can benefit too if you need a starting point. They have guides organized by borough, identity groups, and by area of interest. Of course, there's Time Out, one of the original ways of finding out what's happening. It's like tourism in New York City, but a little bit more locally focused. And of course, I need to plug city events. So like a lot of local governments, the city of New York has events that are focused on parks or music or whatnot. So check in, see what's happening. You can check them out on the website. This can be a great way of having access to wonderful events for little to no money. I'm less familiar with this one, but Secret NYC is a site that offers quote unquote secret guides and other thoughts on how to spend your time in the city. These are just a few of the main ones that I came across when I was moving to the city. If others come to mind, feel free to share them back. You can comment, and that will be helpful for the other people who are listening in.
There's lots of stuff to do for free concerts. And the city is great about putting those on and funding it. So there's lots of stuff to do that doesn't cost anything, and it's just top drawer.
That is David, who lives in Brooklyn with his wife, Deb. Something that David really enjoyed was borough-specific news and outlets. So once you have your citywide information set, really just pick one or two. Think about whether there are borough-level newsletters or papers that you can subscribe to.
I signed up for it's a daily newsletter from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. And it's just a quick read. It's got like, here's the top news story, here's what's going on in the world, here's some editors' picks, and then they also pull in stories from other outlets that are Brooklyn specific. And there's always something on a Friday from Brooklyn Magazine about 12 fun things to do in Brooklyn, or they have something from Eater where it's like 17 new restaurants and 3 are in Brooklyn. So it's really it's like somebody else doing the work for me. So I come off as the hero saying, "Oh, look, Deb, I found these things to do."
Okay, let's go try something.
And it's just a fun, quick read, but it delivers every week.
The Brooklyn Daily Eagle has a section that they're calling "What They're Saying: Live Arts in Brooklyn This Week." So definitely check that out. Okay, so last but not least in the geography focus section of this podcast is to look at things that are happening specifically in your neighborhood. There are a ton of newsletters and websites based on local neighborhood activity just because New York City is so huge. Each neighborhood is kind of like a little city. So, you can both look online and also in person. So, you can Google Brooklyn Heights newsletter or Harlem website, Harlem things going on, and just see what shows up. And maybe there might be a really active site. Probably varies a lot depending on the neighborhood that you're in. And then, of course, don't neglect your physical environment.
If you go to Ferry, you might see something. If you go to a restaurant, a bar, usually they have those boards up where it's like, okay, this is happening, that's happening. So just start there.
So often local coffee shops will have copies of the local newspapers there. Sometimes there's even a neighborhood specific paper of some kind. You can also look at the bulletin boards, see what's going on. And sometimes there are local hubs, community centers, art centers, etc., that are right in your neighborhood that are kind of pumping out information about what's going on. And that's really nice because then you don't have to traverse an hour across the city to do something fun. That kind of covers the geography-focused angle of approaching this task. The other angle is thinking about it in terms of what your interests are. So maybe you don't even want to bother with the geographic-focused things. You want very specific areas of focus, and that can be more satisfying to you. So think about the institutions that might be nearby that could be sharing information out. You could subscribe to them. So we lived close to the Brooklyn Public Library, the central one. So I made sure to follow them and to check out what was going on there all the time. Local parks, sometimes they have associations, so you can see what's happening in the park.
Social media can be such a good resource for finding things. Because I live in Upper Manhattan, I remember I came across something on my social media called Uptown Art Stroll, which is run by the Northern Manhattan Artists Alliance community or something like that. But that collective has so many things that are going on in my particular neighborhood, but also introduced me to so many other outlets where it's they have a 30-day series of events where it's you have open art studios, you have chamber music performances, you have Irish music in the pub.
But yeah, think about where your interests are, similar to how you're thinking about building community. Do you really enjoy the music scene? Are you really into food? Are you really into opera, or do you really love literature? New York City is a place for people who love arts and culture, so I'm baking that assumption into this episode. But maybe you're into pickleball or sports or nautical information. I don't know, there's probably a club for everything. And you can search American History Book Club, New York City, and there's probably something. Or maybe for example, there's a romance-focused bookshop called The Ripped Bodice in Park Slope, and they have events all the time with authors and such. And so just think about local businesses, institutions, and look up those entities, subscribe to their newsletters and social media, and then you'll get periodic updates as to what's going on there.
So what I try to do is once there's an event that I go to and I really enjoy, I try to look up who are the people that are organizing and just go and follow them on Instagram, and you will find everything else that they're doing, right? I follow, for instance, a lot of the Brazilian community niche pages on Instagram, and it's really efficient in getting to know everything that they're doing.
Like a million and one groups on Facebook. We have several that are, geared specifically for Staten Island. One of them is like Staten Island United. There's also Makerspace.
I heard this time and time again from Tomas to Sydney in Manhattan to Jade in Staten Island and beyond, that really they just searched Google for maybe their neighborhood and their interest, and then they had options before them and they checked those out. If you're excited about theater, I do want to highlight a couple different entities. So there's Today Ticks for cheaper ticket opportunities. There's a theater development fund. Also, if you're a public employee, you can get discounts. The New York Theater Guide, of course. And of course, look around in the subway stations. You'll see what's on Broadway. Now, if you love museums, there are so many ways to get into museums for free. So please don't think you need to shell out all this money to go to the world-class museums in New York City. You can get a library card and then get access to Culture Pass, which allows people who are New York residents to get access to free passes once, maybe twice a year for 2 tickets per person. And you can go see a whole slew of museums for free. So Culture Pass, definitely sign up. You can also sign up for something called the ID NYC Municipal ID, and that will allow you access to a full year membership to several institutions. So it does take a few extra steps, so going, getting your picture taken, and waiting for the ID to come in the mail. But if you're really into museums and you think you'll go to some quite often, check it out. Last but not least, if you're waiting for your ID to come in, or you haven't quite figured out Culture Pass, or you are waiting for a slot to become available and you missed one, you can always check out museums that have very specific free days on their website, especially for New York residents. So, it might be free Fridays or free first Thursdays. So just see what's on the website for days that you can go without having to pay too. And again, just remember, you don't always need the internet to know what's going on.
I feel like as I've continued to be in space as well, often just taking a walk around the neighborhood, you will see flyers that are just like, your local park is going to be doing this like movies after dark, or like, I don't know, like they have free Zumba classes. Yeah, like the subway alone. Yeah, you're right. Like they will show you that the public has Shakespeare in the Park going on.
To close out this episode, I want to devote a section just to finding out about restaurants in the city. This is something that was really difficult for me. I don't consider myself a foodie, but it was just overwhelming, the number of options. And sometimes websites were contradictory around maybe what they thought would be good versus, ratings here versus ratings there. So here's what I heard from Sydney and others about how to navigate this. I know for myself, I ended up relying on very specific tailored guides. So if I really wanted to go to a great restaurant, I would look at Eater for the neighborhood, and I would look at The Infatuation for the neighborhood. New York Times has a top 100 list every year. And also the Michelin Guide, you can filter by Bib Gourmands or, One Money Star. So there are ways of looking at these guides and also making sure you're not breaking the bank. So here's Sydney on how she navigates this for herself.
And so New York Times Cooking, as I mentioned, like I learned about Joe's Steamed Rice Roll through New York Times Cooking. But New York Times Cooking really profiles different restaurants that are at vastly different ends of spectrums in terms of like a really fine dining experience, or something that's just like, this is the spot where all the taxi drivers go to get a good meal.
There are endless channels of information, so it's kind of testing out these different channels and seeing one that you feel confident relying on.
I also do a lot of just like Google digging. Okay, good date spots in the Upper West Side, and like found so many options. But then it's like, okay, once I find the list, I then take that to Google Maps. And when I go on Google Maps, I'm looking both at the star rating I would prefer something's at least above like a 4.4, ideally 4.5 or higher. And I also look at the pictures of the food. Presentation matters to me. And also people's experiences of a place matter. I don't think that a 4.5, I've been having conversations with friends about how sometimes culturally speaking, there are places that have delicious food, but the service isn't always the best, and that can result, or the presentation. Sometimes people just rank them lower, right? It might be a mom and pop shop that's ranked lower. I try to also be mindful as I'm looking at reviews of places, not only of the images, the star rating, but also what are people actually saying about a place? Because you'll see sometimes that people are saying things that may, their critique may not speak to what would be your own critique.
I found this point that Sydney made to be so valid because there was a restaurant that was both on Eater and also the New York Times is recommended, but it had a 4.1 on Google. So sometimes it's really important just to dig in and see what people are actually complaining about and see if that stacks up.
And I'm very anti the social media friendly spots. So long lines to me don't guarantee good food. Long lines just mean, yeah, hype is right. Yeah. I'm hype does not guarantee. Yeah, exactly. You gotta be a critical thinker and you gotta be analytical.
Yeah, don't get persuaded by internet personalities or hype pitfalls. Just because something has a huge line doesn't mean it's the cat's pajamas. And that's a wrap. Now go enjoy New York City. Follow How to Move to NYC on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to get more moving advice from New Yorkers.